What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks ever so much again for coming back again on a non-race weekend. I really appreciate it. I have no idea where tonight's show is going to end up. I've no idea where it's going to go because we haven't had a Grand Prix. There's no really obvious talking points. I've got some comments and questions from you guys, which I really appreciate, but I'd love you guys to determine where this show goes for the next hour. So fire in your questions, fire in your comments, fire in your talking points. I've already got some, as I say, so we'll use those if we get stuck. But I'd just love to know what's on your mind. And because we didn't have a race this weekend, and because we're about to embark on a big spell of relentless Formula One over the next few weeks, aren't we, with another triple header? Why not tonight? Let's talk about something that maybe you just always wanted to know about Formula One that may not be necessarily topical, because we've already talked about the Red Bull seat. Is it going to be Perez? We've discussed that loads of times. Lewis's contract. Still haven't got an announcement, but I imagine that will happen very soon. I imagine we'll get some kind of announcement very quickly into this triple header, I would have thought. I think those discussions are already well underway, may even be concluded, and we've just got to hear the details of them. So let's maybe, if you'd like to, bring up some other stuff that maybe we haven't talked about for a few weeks, and we'll get into some of that, and we'll just see where it goes. But as I say, thank you very much for all coming back again. I hope you had a good weekend off. If it was a good weekend off, at least away from Formula One. We are now going back into it. I was chatting to a mate of mine the other day who works for McLaren, and they left today for Bahrain, and they don't come back until the 14th of December, which is a pretty brutal way to finish, all right, a relatively short season, but a pretty intense one. These triple headers are absolute killers for those people involved in the travelling side of Formula One. It's brutal, and I know it's very easy to look at it and go, well, look, they're all living the dream, they're having a great time, it's a job they love, they're getting well paid. All of that may well be true, but it is still brutally, it takes a brutal toll on you physically and mentally. It's hard on the families that get left behind, the kids, the wives and husbands that don't travel. So it is pretty brutal, and I don't want to, play the old sympathy violin for everybody, because they all choose to do it, and I know that. But it is a tough schedule that's been thrown upon everybody in 2020. And this is about to go into the final section of it. And they'll get back just in time for Christmas. So let's crack on. What do you want to talk about? Brian Christensen, straight off the bat, says he's slightly off topic, but have you got some kilometres into the new rig? I have. So that's my new sim racing rig, which you may have seen the video I dropped on Friday, I think it was. Really cool bit of kit, quite different to anything else I've seen, and I am loving it. So yeah, started to put some miles on it, started to work out Bahrain today ahead of my track guide later in the week, and it's great. I'm really enjoying it. If you want to know more about it, go and check that video out. So yeah, starting to build up the miles, and the big difference actually, and this might be interesting for some people, because a lot of people said, has it transformed your lap times? It hasn't transformed the lap times, but what it's definitely done, and I've noticed this just throughout today, is the consistency that I'm able to deliver, particularly through braking, because there's no flex in the rig. So all the braking effort I put in is translated directly through the load cell and into the car on the game. So yeah, it's definitely showing an improvement in consistency, which I guess eventually will translate into lap time. So I'm loving it so far. GR8 UK, what are your thoughts on next year's schedule? Optimistic. That's my first reaction when I saw it. Optimistic. A lot of races, 23 races, that's a record. I know, again, from chatting to mates at the teams, they're disappointed, not just because it's 23 races. I think we all kind of knew that was coming, but more triple headers. And, we kind of chucked triple headers into this season because it was a necessity to get it done. And yet here they are again on next year's provisional calendar. It's looking like, that could well become a norm, because we've done it in 2020, and this is what everybody feared. We've done it in 2020. Why not make that the norm to be able to, fit more races into a normal calendar? So, yeah, optimistic. Whether they all happen, I really don't know. I have to say, though, I think Formula One's done an incredible job of staging a championship this year, as have lots of other sports. But I think Formula One has been really good at getting that happening, getting it done, dealing with the challenges they've had, dealing with the incidents of positive COVID cases over the course of the season too. So you've got to give some respect to the people that have put a lot of work in making this happen. But yeah, we'll see if it plays out as planned next year. Says, can Ferrari return to glory days soon? So you may have seen, there's been a bit of talk, hasn't there, recently about Ferrari's engine power unit for next year. They're calling it, apparently with some leaked document, and I'm always hesitant to comment and discuss leaked information because where's it been leaked from? Who leaked it? How accurate is it? Is it true, or is it just something that's going to be completely fabricated by a newspaper? But the leaked document says that they've termed it the Superfast, and that it's already showing signs of an improvement on where they are now. So a slight improvement on what they've currently got. Now that's obviously not enough to get them catapulted up the grid because they've got a huge deficit right now, it would seem. So they need a bigger improvement, but they've got time to do that. So it sounds like they're not doing a revolution in terms of its architectural design, similar design layout, just with small improvements all over the place. And we'll see. It can't go further backwards, can it? So they had a good result, didn't they, in Turkey, which shows that there's at least some promise in the car. And if they can sort the power unit side of things out, absolutely, why not? Could they not be back up fighting for podiums and even race wins? So look, this is Ferrari. They have the biggest budget in the entire sport. So if anybody can turn around a situation like this, well, you've got to say they can. Let's see. Carlos Sainz to kick ass with his teammates. Well, that's one of the big pluses, isn't it, for Ferrari, that they've got Charles Leclerc, who is on form right now. Sebastian Vettel, obviously having a very difficult couple of years now and is leaving the team. And those two facts may well be interconnected with each other. But the fact is he's leaving, and the guy that's coming in is really on great form at McLaren. Now, will that directly translate when he moves over to Ferrari? We'll have to wait and see. There may be some getting used to, you know, their new car and what it feels like and what type of driving style it requires to get the best out of it. Those are all unknowns until you get in the car. But he is a guy that's full of confidence. He's doing very well, and I would imagine if you can get those two drivers to gel, Ferrari have a very, very strong driver lineup next year. Mark Cooper says, sorry I'm late. That's all right, mate. That's all right. Have you got a note from your mum? No worries. Thanks for joining, pal. What will Lewis's magic number be, says Chi Zhang. 9, 10 or 11. So I guess if what you're referring to there, if what you mean is, what's he looking for before he bows out of the sport? Or what's his maximum, what's his total number of championships going to be? I think, you know, we've got to be hesitant to assume anything, but if there is any assumption to be made, we can assume he's at least got a very good shout of winning number 8 next year. And then, of course, we go into a bit of an unknown in 2022 where we just don't quite know what the cars are going to be like, what the competitive order is going to be like, because everything changes. And that's quite exciting for us as fans, isn't it? Oh, why has my camera gone off? This is not good. Hold on. Oh, God, I've lost my camera stream. Oh, goodness me. Hold on a minute. I don't know why, but I've lost my camera. Fuck's sake. I don't know if you can hear me, but I've lost my camera. Hopefully it's just rebooting itself. Yeah, I know, thank you. I know I've lost it all. Hold on. Oh, God. Bear with me. Just reconnecting. Hold on. You can still hear me, good. Right, so apologies, I know the camera's gone, I'm still here, it's just rebooting itself, so I'm hoping it will come back. But there you go, look, what else do you expect from me? Perfection? Whilst this is sorting itself out, let me see if I can, I'll keep talking whilst trying to reboot the camera. That's going to be, I can't do two things at once, what am I talking about? Hold on. Right, bear with me. I'm going to just shut this down and restart it. Sorry. Right, rebooting. Oh, here we go. Right. Sorry, guys. Are you still there? Is anyone still with me? Have you all buggered off? I wouldn't blame you at all. Right. Okay, I think it's firing up, so we should be back in a second. I'm glad you can still hear me. So I'm going to keep talking, and you can listen. Hopefully your screen will go from black to having some kind of image in a moment. I hope. What was I talking about? Well, I don't know, but let me pick another question. Right. Oh, Science and Ferrari. I think that's going to be great. Can't wait for that pairing. Oh, the fucking camera. What's going on? Sorry, guys. Right, there we go. We're back. We're back. Okay, there's going to be a slight delay at your end because you're running slightly behind me, but right, we're back. We're back. Sorry about that. Thank you. If anyone's still here, I really appreciate it. You've just had a good couple of minutes of complete black screen. There we go. Right, let's carry on. Did you see Red Bull's front wing mess up in Turkey? A 7-degree difference. That's crazy, says Varun Sambi. I did see that, and I have a question on that very subject. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, check this out. Here we go. So Neil Roberts asks something very similar. How could a team make this error without noticing? Could they have corrected it with a nose change pit stop? Would it have been worth the stop with the conditions in Turkey? How a setup error disguised Red Bull's front wing progress? So the question, I'll come to all of those individual questions in a moment, but just take a look at the picture. I don't know if you can see, if I can perhaps zoom in. That yellow line, there we go. The yellow line that you can see that's been placed across the top of the image. You can see on the left-hand side of the image as you look at it, the front wing flap is basically touching the yellow line at the top. On the other side of the image, it definitely is not. And you can see, there you go, if I zoom in, can you see that better? You can see there, the right-hand side, if you look at it, the left-hand side of the car has a lot less flap angle than the right-hand side. It was actually 7 degrees, so Red Bull said. And you can clearly see it there. So total imbalance. Now, the questions, let me just bring that back to the normal size. How can a team make this error? Were the questions, and how would it hurt the car? So let's talk about that. Well, first of all, how can a team make an error like that? It seems crazy that a Formula One team can make such an error. 7 degrees difference, if indeed that's what it was, and it definitely looks as extreme as that, is huge. Because when we're talking about making a front wing change, normally in a pit stop, if you come in for a pit stop, and you often see when new tyres go on, you'll get a quick change on the front wing flaps. We're talking about half a degree, maybe a degree of flap angle change in a regular pit stop. So to end up with 7 degrees difference seems bizarre. Now, I actually don't know the full story behind this. You would imagine that one side has gone up and one side has gone down. And then you only have to half the actual amount of change, of course, on each side to get this vast difference from one to the other. It could have been that there was communication breakdown on the team side to the operators, to the guys that were doing the job. It could have been that the little electric tools that they use to make that quick adjustment, which is almost like a little electric battery drill that you can preset to make, one full turn or 2 turns or half a turn. So you can set it to whatever it is the change is coming from the engineers. Half a turn up, you zap that gun into a little adjuster on the front wing, pull the trigger, and it will make that adjustment by half a turn or a full turn or whatever it is. It may well be that tool has failed and it's just wound it in a complete couple of turns in the wrong direction. I have no idea. But the next part of that question is, what will the effect be on the car? And interestingly, what a lot of people think, and let me just bring the picture back. What a lot of people assume is that if you have a situation like that and one side of the flap has got much more angle than the other, that one side of the car is going to get a massive amount more downforce than the other. And in truth, that doesn't really happen, because the loads that are transmitted from that front wing on those front wing flaps, of course, are all being transmitted largely through those central pillars in the centre of the nose. So the load is actually central on the car. It's pulling the entire front end of the car down. So the actual imbalanced front, left to right is not actually the biggest problem in terms of downforce. What's a bigger problem is the overall amount of downforce that wing is giving, which won't be what they intended it to be. So you'll either have more or less depending on what the original intention was, and that clearly has a big impact on performance and the way you can look after tyres and that kind of thing. The other impact that it has, and if you look at that picture again, look at where the flap angles are. Of course, those flaps are generating or producing downforce from the angle and the change of angle that the airflow has an effect on the airflow as it goes over it. But it also affects the airflow moving down the rest of the car, because it affects how that airflow moves around the front wing and from front wheels and through the front suspension, and how it interacts with the flow further down the car. And that could be different, of course, with this setup on either side of the car. So that could have an impact further downstream, if you like. But the bigger problem with all of this is just the sheer overall amount of downforce rather than the sort of imbalance side to side. And it would have definitely hampered Max, because everybody's looking for the optimum setup. So if you veer away from that, either up or down in terms of downforce levels, you're not optimum anymore. And that means that you can't push the car to its maximum. You can't look after tyres in the way that you might have originally intended. And it's obviously just not the best way to operate. So it was a horrendous cock-up by something as big as 7 degrees is huge. I don't know the answers to how it happened, but it's very unusual. Certainly very unusual from somebody like the elite team that is Red Bull that we know of. So I would imagine that they will have very quickly got to the bottom of that, and I'm pretty sure it won't happen again. Andrew Storm says wings are boring. I'm sorry about that, Andrew, but someone asked the question, I'm answering it. You can think wings are boring. I mean, I don't. I love them. And that's the beauty of Formula One. I guess we all have a slightly different take. There's the technical side, there's the sporting side, the driver side, the team side. All fascinating aspects for me. You can look at engines, gearboxes, tyres. Some people will think each individual one of those is boring for whatever reason. Others will love them. So there you go. That's Formula One. We've finished talking about wings. You can come back, Andrew, and join the party again. Right, let's see what else we want to talk about. Right, someone said, does it ever happen to me? Not that I'm aware of, no. Back in my day, we were actually doing it, back in my day, that makes me sound really old. We were actually doing those front wing adjustments most of the time by hand. Towards the end of my career at McLaren, we started using tools to make automatic adjustments, but actually for most of my time, we were using a sort of T, like a T key, and doing half a turn or 2 turns or whatever by hand. But then we had more time because for a lot of that spell, fuel was being pumped into the car. Right, Andrew, I really have finished talking about wings. Do you think if Aston Martin, if McLaren has a race-winning car, Mercedes will allow them to win? Sorry, I'm just trying to make sense of that. Do you think if Aston Martin McLaren has a race-winning car? Okay, so do we think if Aston Martin has a race-winning car next year, Mercedes will allow them to win? I'm not sure how Mercedes are going to stop them from winning if they have a race-winning car. And it actually brings me on to another question that somebody else asked. Here we go. Jilly the Kid here asks this one. Let me just, where is it? There we go. Move that down. He says, hi Mark, something that's I've always wanted to know, do customer cars have identical engines to the works teams, or do they give the customers slightly underpowered ECU maps to theirs? Loving the YouTube videos right now. Thanks very much. So the rules, I'm sure many of you know this already, but the rules actually do state that the engine and the software, so the hardware and the software that a customer team gets, has to be, by the laws of the Formula One, the same as the parent team, as the manufacturer team. Or at least what they say is the customer has to have the opportunity to have the same. They don't have to take the same upgrades at the same time. If they're all out of sequence in terms of their power unit usage, a manufacturer can bring in an upgraded engine. the customer team may not want to take that at that time because it might upset their scheduling over the season, and they may wait a couple of races. So there are times when a manufacturer can have one version of an engine and their customer can have something different, but they all have to end up having the same opportunity to have the same power units as the manufacturer team. What can happen, and I can tell you this from experience, because when McLaren went from being Mercedes kind of works team, if you like, to then Mercedes starting their own team and McLaren became a customer, I mean, I know for a fact that whilst we had the same engines, all of these engines have some discrepancy or some differences, albeit small, between each other. So Mercedes would run them all on a dyno. They'd get power figures and drivability figures for all of these different things. And then they would obviously keep the best ones for themselves. And you might not think that's a very big difference, but it can be when we're talking about such small gains from one to another. It can actually be a reasonable difference. It didn't always work out, because there have been occasions when the manufacturer team has kept what they think is the best unit for themselves, only for it to blow up, some way into a race where the one that wasn't necessarily as powerful has managed to keep going. So there are small differences, but in the regulations, they're not allowed to just deliberately hold stuff back or give somebody something different. So coming back to your question, when it comes to Aston Martin, if they've got a quick car next year, front running, challenging Mercedes are not at liberty to just start, other than giving them the second best of a bunch of identical engines, they're not at liberty to be able to start holding things back or changing parameters that would deliberately slow them down. That would be against the rules. Surely Marc have a better power unit than the Pink Panthers. Surely Marc have a better... Well, Marc will have... so that's exactly what I'm saying. Marc will have the best of their bunch of power units, but they have to be the same. They're the same spec. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Cosmos 2017 says Mercedes has some guy off the street assembling the engines for customer teams. I mean, just coming back to that, reliability, of course, Mercedes have no interest in giving a customer team an engine that might not finish a race or might be unreliable, because of course it reflects badly on Mercedes. So reliability is king in all of this, because that's what the Mercedes brand is in Formula One for, to promote themselves. And if they can have, four cars, in the top four of a race, then great. They're all Mercedes as far as they're concerned. Right, let's see. Sandy Barnes, hi Sandy, says, how's your hand? Re the cookie burns. You do so much for us. Did you see that video last week? And I did properly burn my hand. It was obviously stupid. I'd just taken the pot off the oven. Of course it was going to be hot. I just didn't realise it was going to be that hot. Carl S says, I'm late to the party. What have I missed? Carl, don't worry about it, mate. All you've missed is the screen going to black for 5 minutes when my camera shut down. So you're fine. Welcome along. Thanks for joining. Right, let's see. Do all the teams have their own airplanes to travel from race to race, says Brendan Burke? No, they don't. Lots of teams used to, and it's not actually that they all used to own their own planes. We used to charter planes a lot. It doesn't make sense for many people to own their own plane, in all honesty, in terms of private air travel. It's far more efficient to rent one if you want to go down that route, given the amount of time that you're using it. So a lot of teams rent charter flights. And at the moment, of course, everybody's going on charter flights collectively in their bubbles. But some teams do own a plane, of course. I remember Ilmore, when they were providing engines for us at Mercedes, they had their own little tiny plane that, because they had a very small crew, they had a little 10 or 12 seater that used to take everybody to and from a race. Of course, Ron had his own plane. A lot of the drivers had their own planes. We used to charter planes that were bigger because we had a bigger team. So most teams, I wouldn't say most teams own their own plane. I think that's completely the opposite. But a lot of teams definitely still use private travel for the shorter haul races. Let me see, what else have we got here? So party mode ban has levelled the power to the Pink Panthers, says CG Deluxe. Party mode ban has levelled them. No, I don't think so. I think the Pink Panthers, as I said before, hardware and software has to be the same. So the Pink Panthers had access to the same party modes as the Mercedes team did. They would have some say, along with the Mercedes engineers, about when they were used and how much they were used, but they get given the same parameters that the works team would have. So I don't think the party mode has necessarily helped the customer teams of a particular engine brand, because in fact with somebody like Williams, for example, who had that Mercedes party mode available to them, but they're further down the back of the grid, they've kind of lost out because the teams around them that maybe didn't have such a strong party mode, well, now no one's got it. That was one of the strengths, particularly when it came to things like qualifying in Williams' armoury, which they've kind of lost. So it's not that Mercedes had it and the works teams didn't. Right, what else have we got going on here? As an engineer, does it upset you that Bottas doesn't win a championship, or are you more interested in the Constructors' Championship, Zetro Garage? So that's a decent question. I think what you're saying is if I was in that Mercedes team working on, say, Bottas's car, does it upset me that he's not winning a championship? It depends who you are, because you've got to think of a Formula One team as broken down into three main teams. There's the team on Lewis's car, there's the team on Valtteri's car, and then there's everyone else. And by everyone else, I mean the engineering team, the analysts that are not associated to either car, and the hundreds, if not thousands of people back at base that are just working for the team, that have no association with one driver or the other. For those guys, and I've been in both situations, for those guys, the Constructors' Championship's a big deal. So to win that is huge, because that's what you are. You're the constructor. You're part of it. It's the team's championship. If you're working for that team in a, as I said, an area that's not directly associated with one driver or another, the Constructors' Championship is huge. It's what I guess means the most to you. But if you're working on one side of the garage or another, if you're directly associated with Lewis or with Valtteri, everything is designed about is centered around getting that driver to win. So if you're working on Lewis's car, you really do not want Valtteri winning, obviously, because it means your driver hasn't. If you're on Valtteri's car, seeing Lewis win 6 world titles with the Mercedes team is heartbreaking, because your guy hasn't won any. And I know they've swapped teams around at Mercedes over the years when it was Nico, so it's not quite that straightforward. But if you're working on one side of the garage, your driver is the centre of your universe when it comes to work, and that's all that matters, just like it is for that driver. Valtteri is hating the fact that Lewis is ticking off more championships, and in exactly the same way, his team of mechanics and engineers will feel exactly the same way about it. Right, are we going to have artificial wet races in the near future, says Alex V. No, I don't think we are. I mean, I raised that question, didn't I, last week? I think something like 3/4 of you said we definitely don't want artificial wet races. We want to leave it. It's great when it happens, but that's kind of what's great about it. It's in the hands of the gods. You know, it's random and it can happen at any time, and the teams and drivers just have to deal with it when it comes along. We don't want artificial wet races. I get the argument for it, and I wouldn't actually, personally, I wouldn't be against just trying it, just experimenting with it at some stage, whether that's in a non-championship race or in a test session or whatever, just to see what happens. But I don't think we're going to see it. I don't think we really want to see it as a regular feature in Formula One. Doug Block says, hi Mark, how's the sim racing going? I'll tell you honestly what I do with my sim racing. And when I say sim racing, I actually don't do a huge amount of racing at this point. I have a limited amount of time that I can get onto the whole thing. And when I do, I love it. I get so obsessed with chasing a lap time on things like time trial or free testing that's what I end up spending. If I've got an hour, I'll jump on here for an hour and I will be obsessive about trying to shave, you know, even if it's hundredths of a second off my lap time, I will keep going. I mean, I was doing it today and I was running late for something. I was thinking, right, I'm just going to dip below the next, I was really close to the sort of threshold of dropping below the next second, if you like, on the lap time. And I was hundredths of a second away from it. And I went through about 3 or 4 laps of dropping down by 1,000th of a second. And it was becoming so obsessive. I was getting later and later for what I had to go and do. But in my mind, I could not let it go. And eventually I did get it done. I was about 10 minutes late, but I had to quickly go and crack on with what was next, and I managed to make it up. But that's the way my mind works. It's obsessive about lap time. At the weekend, I actually had a go at doing some racing, which I do really enjoy, and I want to do more of, because I think you develop a huge amount of skill when it comes to actual racing, or very different types of skill than just chasing lap times. But I guess that comes, from my engineering background, is that's what I'm constantly trying to do, is shave even just the tiniest amounts off the lap time. What tracks am I racing on? So today I've just started on Bahrain, but I love to race them all. It's nice to get back onto the F1 game after doing some Project Cars 2 and some of the recent circuits that are not on the original 2020 F1 calendar. I really like the F1 2020 game. I'm really into it. I've got used to it, the way the car feels. So nice to be back on that. But I love all the tracks. I love doing them all. There's not many that I don't enjoy, because they all provide a different challenge. And that's, I guess, what we can say about, even as fans, we'll look at races and think they might be really boring. Some are, some definitely are. But as a driver, you get a very different perspective on that. And it may well be that it's not actually boring to drive, just boring to view a race on. Purple Westy says, Max Verstappen joked about swapping cars with Lewis for a private test. Would this ever happen, or would contracts and teams not allow it? Absolutely no way. There's absolutely no way, because, yeah, you're right. Contractually, they couldn't do it. There's so many complicated branding sides, with Lewis wearing the wrong overalls or sitting in the wrong car with the wrong stickers on the side. I mean, it's a minefield. I mean, those seem trivial, but the amount of money that these brands are all paying, there's no way they could allow that to happen. And that's before you even consider the kind of knock-on effects of what would happen if one was quicker than the other. What do you do then? What if Max got in the Merc and was quicker? Or what if Lewis got into the Red Bull and was blisteringly quicker than Max? I mean, these are questions that I think they'd be unlikely that would be the case, because one's so used to the other car, to their own car, it would take some getting used to switch over. But there's, whilst it would be great to see, that will never happen. What you could potentially get is different drivers competing or testing in a generic car, let's say. So you'll never get them swapping into each other's cars. But what about if they could all run in an unbranded F3 car or something, or a touring car? That also may seem far-fetched, but is a lot more likely or more possible to happen than actually swapping cars, like Max said. That was all a bit of bravado from Max's front, but it will never happen, I'm afraid. Left one says, what about moving races to closer to wet weather? Going back to that previous point. We could do that in terms of trying to increase the likelihood of a wet race. The problem with that is the promoters hate it, because if you're trying to host a race in rainy season, people don't come and watch. People won't pay money to come into your racetrack, and that's what the promoters live off, is the income from fans coming in. So that's why we follow the sun around the world, because to host a race in a beautiful sunny day is a great day out for people, and they're much more willing to part with a huge amount of cash to come and do it. Have you ever driven an F1 car before? I haven't, and I'm gutted about that. I've said this before, but I've driven the F1 simulators at McLaren over the years, which have been amazing experiences. I mean, genuinely brilliant stuff, mind-blowing. But I never got the chance to drive a car. Gutted about that. I mean, who knows? Maybe it could still happen one day. We see the drivers' comparisons in Race of Champions, says Ray Davison. Yeah, we do, and that's a good point. That is one of the few occasions we get drivers from different teams competing in the same car on the same racetrack, and I love it. I think it's a great event, really, really cool. But I think we could do more of that. It'd be great. Do you think 2021 is a season to not have a drive, if any, because the regs change in 22? So you and Monday. It depends, I guess. If you're talking about somebody like Checo or Magnussen or somebody or Albon, who maybe is looking like they may not have a drive for next year, I guess so. It's not the end of the world. The problem is most teams won't want to take a new driver in 2022 because that's such a big upheaval for a team at a time when everything else is changing. The car, it's not just the car changing like it normally does year to year. The entire concept is changing. The sporting regulations are changing. The rules are changing. We've got financial regulations coming in. Everything. It's the biggest change Formula One's had as far back as I can remember. And so to change a driver lineup at the same time is a variable that most teams, I think, would try and do without. So that's, I think, why we're getting some contracts being nailed down. Maybe some new drivers coming in at teams like Haas for this year, or next year rather, so that they've got some stability when it comes to 2022. So I'm not sure this is a good year to sit out on the sidelines if you want to come back, particularly. Kay Chalice says, what about bring back something like Pro Car? That's exactly what I'm talking about, really. That'd be great, wouldn't it? If you got a standard sort of touring car or sports car or something on a race weekend and chucked all the current drivers in it to go and drive. There's a couple of problems with it. Formula One, since Pro Car was happening, and I can't remember when that last ran, but Formula One has now become such a big corporate entity with the drivers being such a valuable commodity. Some of them are going to be reluctant to allow their driver to have the risk of racing in something that they're not in control of. And then the other is that even if you did get all the drivers into the same car, of course, the fans would all assume that that's an absolute barometer of who's best. But it isn't, because these drivers are in Formula One because they are experts at driving their Formula One car. And, Alex Albon is perhaps a good example of this. Alex, an incredible talent, has won in previous championships, has dominated previous championships. He steps up to the Red Bull racing car and just simply cannot get the best out of it. Now, that's a pretty specific case, but the same thing applies. When you come to something like a touring car, it takes certain characteristics to get the best out of it. Some may naturally have those or find those very easy. Others will not. And so whilst it could be great entertainment, I would genuinely love to see it, it's not necessarily going to be the barometer of driver talent or skill or performance that we would all love and expect it to be. And that would also be a problem for some drivers and their teams to sign up to. When do you see the drivers in a sim in the pits and a driverless car on track, says Tim Coville. Good question. I don't think it'll ever happen in Formula One, but I do think that we will see that in another formula. I'm sure you've all seen Robocar and how that's going. They had a pretty embarrassing shunt a few weeks ago. But I do think that's a really interesting area that they're breaching into. Not necessarily interesting from a fan perspective, and you can't compare it to what we're all used to and what we love. But I think from a technology perspective, from an innovation perspective, where we're talking about either racing in VR, which I think is what you're suggesting, from the pit lane, or with Robo Race, where they're doing it using AI, so completely automated cars. Those areas I think are fascinating. What you're talking about there with drivers in a sim and a real car on the racetrack, the technology exists to make that happen, doesn't it? That's not rocket science. We could easily do that. We could drive the Formula One cars 20 years ago remotely from the pits. That was never an issue. It was only the regulations that stopped you doing it. We could control the power steering because it was all hydraulically operated. The throttle was easily operated. That's all electronic as well. The brake pedal was very easy to do. It keeps even more so now with brake-by-wire. Gear shift, all automatic. We've got a GPS to guide the car around the circuit. There's nothing stopping us driving these cars remotely if we wanted to do that for some kind of demonstration or a show. It's a very different discipline. I think it would be really interesting to see, but I can't see it kind of taking over or being part of an F1 weekend or anything like that, if that's what you're suggesting. Racing the drivers during a live race virtually. Wow. So Fire Up says that happens. Formula E have had that for some time now, where you can download a sim racing game. Actually, you can get it on your phone, and you can enter the live race with a ghost car that you control. And it's amazing. It's not perfect yet. They're still figuring it out, but the technology is incredible. You can take part in the actual race as it's happening in real time. Amazing stuff. And I think we can do a lot more with that. I think Formula One could do a lot more with that, with somebody like Codemasters. If we can make that side of things develop further, I mean, what an amazing interaction fans could have with the real race. So I love all that stuff. I can't wait to see more of it. Let me see. Do F1 cars use brake-by-wire, says Will Bennett. They do. So they do, yes. So the braking, I'm sure many of you know this, but the braking on the front axle is traditional braking through a hydraulic system activated directly from the brake pedal operating on a master cylinder, like it always has. On the rear end, there is a hydraulic system which operates regular brakes. They're much smaller than the front end because the rear discs are actually not used very much. They've got small, thin discs, small pads. The majority of the braking on the rear end is done by the MGUK, of course, the motor generator unit. They're able to use that to retard the car, to slow the car down. So they use that electric motor to put resistance in through the axle, which slows the car down. And in doing that, that's where it recharges or harvests the energy. A bit like your dynamo on your old bike, where you used to put something onto the wheel, didn't you? A little wheel onto the tyre itself. That tyre would drive that dynamo. In turn, it would sap energy from the moving, rotating wheel. It would effectively slow the bike down. Not that you'd notice it because it wasn't very strong on that. But in Formula One, that's pretty much what's happening. That MGUK is putting a huge amount of resistance through the axle, slowing it down, harvesting energy to go back into the battery at the same time. So yes, and that happens. That's all controlled via brake-by-wire. So as you push the pedal, a signal is sent from the brake pedal potentiometer through to a little mini ECU on the brake system, which then tells that MGUK how much braking you've requested at the pedal end, and therefore how much resistance it should put in through that rear axle. If that fails, if all that falls apart or your MGU fails, you can of course use the standard hydraulic system. But as, if you remember, I think, was it 2014 or 15, Nico Rosberg found out in Canada, where when that happens, because we've got such small rear brakes on the car now, they will not last very long if you have to start using them in the traditional way. There we go. I hope that clears that one up. Ray C says F1 needs more overtaking. Yeah, that'd be good, wouldn't it? I mean, of course, that is one of the big reasons behind the big shift in 2022. One of the big driving forces around the rule change is to try and encourage more overtaking, to allow the cars to follow more closely, which would then, in turn, give more overtaking opportunities, perhaps. That's the thinking, and all testing and simulations so far say that that's working, that's going to plan, and it should have that effect. So then it'll be interesting to see how it actually plays out in real life. Okay, Jan Koldusek says, "Hi Mark, under what circumstances would you get back to F1, back to a job in an F1 team?" I mean, I would never say never to anything like that. I mean, a lot of people have asked me that before, and I would say I've got no desire to go back to an F1 team. Not because I don't enjoy it. I absolutely loved my time in Formula One. It's a very privileged position to be in. It was my dream, and I was lucky enough to do it. Would I go back? I'd only go back if I thought there was something that I could do that a team needed from me, that I could really help to help a team win. I don't think there is at the moment. I don't think there's anything that I necessarily have that the teams don't currently have. So there's no real need or desire from a team to have me there or me to go back to a team. And the other side of things is that I'm absolutely loving what I'm doing right now. I love the combination of things that I do right now, which is vastly varied. Obviously next year I've got the Wheeler Dealers project, which is going to take a huge amount of time. Really looking forward to it, but again, it's something totally different. So, you know, when I worked for Formula One, and this is what a lot of my friends who still work there say, is that whilst it's amazing, it's great, it is repetitive and it is not monotonous, that's the wrong word, but it's relentless. And it's a lifestyle rather than just a job. So, you know, like for me, I committed to it massively, wholeheartedly. Everything I had went into that for a 10-year period. And after that, I was done. Not because I fell out of love with it, but because I'd ticked all the boxes I wanted to tick. We won the championship, which is an incredible achievement to make. And therefore, I decided I wanted a new set of challenges. And that's when I moved on to doing the things that I do now. And so, look, there's no desire for me to go back, but I would never say never, I guess is the answer. Bring in the next big cheat development. That's not me. Come on, you got me all wrong. I could bake some cookies and drag some rubbers across a desk if that might help anybody. Who is the most promising young driver getting into F1 as per you? So, Varun Sambi, who's the most promising young driver getting into Formula One? That's a really interesting question, but a really difficult one to answer. And whenever anyone says to me, you know, how can we rate a driver? Who's the best driver? Who's the best driver coming up? It is impossible. It's an impossible question. I'm very excited about Mick Schumacher. I think the way he has developed, even over the course of this season, has been great. But you know, I'm also quite excited about some of the others as well, because they've all deserved to be there. They all have talents and exciting sides to their game, which we don't yet know how that will play out in Formula One if and when they all get the chance. So I think the story behind Mick Schumacher is obviously great, and we're all kind of unfairly waiting to see how he's going to compare to his dad, which is clearly horrible for him. It's not the right way to go, but naturally that's what we're all kind of waiting to see. So I guess that's the most exciting for me. But yeah, there's lots of great talent. I think motorsport is blessed right now with some great talent bubbling away under the surface. Not enough seats for it all to get in, you know, as is often the case. But I think the future of Formula One, you know, is bright. Oscar Piastri, yeah. Alex Smith, great driver, yeah, really, really strong. Callum Ilott, Varun, yeah, very, very good as well. I think they're all great. I think there's a lot of really great talent. So yeah, they're all exciting. I mean, Katie Headley, I don't know how to answer that. How high could you climb if you had sticky nipples? It's a great question. You might be in the wrong chat, or maybe you're not. But interesting. I've never thought about it, but now, of course, there's nothing else I can think about. Thanks for that. Do you think it's better to have an experienced rookie combo, or have two rookie drivers? Taz4976. Again, it totally depends on who those drivers are and what the team is. You know, if you look at the Haas team, I mentioned earlier that nobody really wants to be changing drivers for 2022. That's one of the main reasons that they have opted now to switch both of their drivers, because by the time they get to 22, they'll have two drivers that are no longer rookies and will be slightly more experienced. So two rookies in a team is always tough. It really is tough, because from an engineering perspective, you need the drivers to help shape your development, and a rookie will always find that very, very difficult to do. So personally, if I had the choice, I would always have at least one very experienced driver in there to help shape the direction that we go as a team. But you can't always take that. You know, Haas, I do think, are also making a decent decision in terms of thinking further down the line. You need to go to the Sticky Nipples channel, says Fire Up. Well, I may well do that afterwards. Right, experience for developing the car, says Renty. Totally agree. Good experience like Kimi, yes, says Varun. Absolutely. Experience like Pasta, no. Pasta Maldonado, can I just say, whilst we all joke and it became really fashionable to take the piss out of him, actually had a huge amount of talent. He had a lot of good strengths to his character and his persona as a driver. And his experience was definitely one of those. So, you know, it's easy to joke about his results and some of the crashes he had. He brought a lot of experience to a team, and that was valuable. He also brought a lot of cash. All right, how many times did you almost get fired from McLaren? Thinking back to Kimi's blue gloves. How many times? You know, I found recently. I've still got all of the letters, the disciplinary letters that I got from McLaren. I've got them all. I was intending to put them all in a frame. When I eventually build my garage or my man cave, they'll probably go up there. So I definitely had 3 or 4 major incidents. I think they're all in the book. If you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read the book, why not? Go and read the book. But yeah, I had 3 or 4 major incidents where I probably came relatively close to getting fired. All stupid, all my own responsibility, my own fault. I make no bones about that. I was an idiot back then. But I always got away with it. And I think that was maybe part of my skill and charm, was that I always managed to stay just on the right side of absolute disaster, which meant that I kept my job, but I also had an amazing amount of fun doing it. And as I said, if you want to know more about all of those things, go read the book. So Glenn Robertson said, would it suit Haas to keep Grosjean or Magnussen on for a year to help develop the 22 car? Well, I mean, yes, there's some, if you mean behind the scenes, there is some merit in that, in having an experienced development driver, if you like, but there's only so much you can do with that. And they may well do that. You know, a lot of this work will be done in the simulator, certainly in the early part will be done in the simulator. And there is some value to having an experienced driver from that perspective. And they may well be thinking along those lines. I mean, they've already got Pietro Fittipaldi, who's doing a lot of their simulator work now, and he may not be experienced in Formula One terms, but he's very experienced in driving the simulator with the current car, and therefore when it comes to driving the simulator with the new car, he'll be perfectly placed to evaluate the differences and perhaps help shape some development direction with that. So I do believe you're right. I think you're right. An experienced driver developing for 22 is important, but in the car, they know what they got from Grosjean and Magnussen, and they weren't happy enough with it. They think they can build a team around two young drivers for 22, and to me that makes some sense too. Right, nearly tea o'clock. Jazz Woodall, yeah, thanks for the reminder. Yeah, 5 minutes or so. Let me see, I've got a couple of questions, so let's pop these up. Chris A says, when a car's wrecked by either the driver or another team's driver, who pays for it? How's it paid for? What gets reused? How long does it all take? And what paperwork has to be done? Well, the answer to some of those things in terms of how long it takes and what gets reused, of course, is massively dependent on what the crash was. But who pays for it? It's almost always the team's car that was crashed. It's not like in your road car, if you have a crash, whoever's fault it was tends to pay out. It doesn't work like that in Formula One. But having said that, there are some teams, I don't know if it still happens this way, but there certainly have been a lot of teams in the past, often the smaller teams, that have insurance policies for things like that. You know, a lot of teams don't have enough budget to just cover major crash damage, so they take out insurance policies for it. The bigger teams tend not to. They just swallow it up, and it's unfortunate if it wasn't your fault, but that's just the way it goes. It's part of racing. So you swallow the cost, you repair it yourself, or you rebuild it yourself, and you move on, and that's pretty much it. So it's very different to an accident that happens out on the road, and pretty much if it happens to you as a team, you just got to suck it up. Oh, here's one. Alan Stewart says, let me move that down. Alan Stewart says, thoughts on the announcement that W Series is going to be a support race to F1 next year. Will it help to boost the series or perhaps damage it, being seen as a lesser feeder series to the F1? It's a good point, and I'd like to know what you think on this one, because this is been controversial at times. W Series, a lot of people don't like it, a lot of people love the idea. Personally, I think it's great, and the fact that it's now going to be on the F1 calendar for certain races next year is exactly, for me, what the series needs to do. If this series is coming in to make a statement that we need to be better at offering opportunities across the board in motor racing, whether that is to women, to girls, whether it's to disabled drivers, whether it's to drivers from poorer backgrounds, all of these things are really valuable causes that F1 should be embracing. And so to give W Series, which is highlighting at least one of those issues, a bigger platform to highlight those on, of course, is great for W Series. That's exactly what they needed to do. They've gone exactly in the right path, and their voice is now much louder. The girls that are taking part will have a bigger opportunity. And will it be a boost for the series? I think it will, because more people will hear about it, they'll know about it, they will get to see the driving talent on offer. That's where the next question comes in, because it has to be a series that is full of great driving talent. And that will come from how those girls are recruited to be part of that series, of course. So ongoing, the W Series will have to be very strong in that area. And I think we've had some great talent in it over its first season. There was certainly some great racing. You know, they're all in the same cars. They're essentially F3 cars. So we had some great racing. And, you know, on an F1 weekend when the Formula One racing is often, you know, dull and people often complain that we don't get enough great wheel-to-wheel racing, when you see something like F2 or F3 or now W Series racing where it is wheel-to-wheel, it's close, it's closely fought, that's going to be great. The fans watching in the stadium or watching when it's broadcast will love that side of things. So, you know, I think it's a big positive, big plus, and I can't wait to see how they get on. Is Jamie Chadwick close to getting an F1 seat? Not close enough, unfortunately. She's doing some development work with Williams, isn't she? Unfortunately, she's not close enough. And what I've just said about new drivers coming in for 2022, I mean, let's not rule out the fact that a new driver could come in at the end of 2021 ready for 22. I think it's less likely than it might have been in other seasons. You know, I think in terms of her, the opportunities becoming further and further down the line, and unfortunately, you need to get these opportunities in early when you strike when the iron's hot. She's won the championship. That's really her opportunity. So I'm not sure she's going to make it to F1, but that doesn't mean that she can't inspire others by winning that championship and getting a role within a Formula One team. 3 minutes to beer o'clock. Right, have I got anything else? Oh yeah, this one's quite good. From Drew Blank Music, he says, there you go, greetings Rockstar. Thanks my man. Do you think Marc will be developing their 2021 floor on track before the season's end? And that, I think, is a good question to finish on. Because the answer to that, I think, is going to be yes. And I don't think it will just be Marc. I think we'll start to see new floors being trialled, even if it's just on a Friday. But maybe now that Marc have the championship sewn up, maybe we'll start racing those as well. Will we start seeing new barge boards that will interact with that new floor and new front wings that will all be part of that development process? Don't forget to cope with the loss of downforce. And even more than that, the loss of control, airflow control that the rear portion of the floor brings today. When that's gone next year, you don't just suck it up and say, right, well, we've lost a chunk of downforce. You try everything to recover that. So to do that, you need to reimagine the way the barge board controls the flow down the side of the car. Reimagine the way the front wing flaps generate the vortices that will then be passed and controlled by the barge boards and then on to sealing the rear of the floor. All of that concept has to change to suddenly be able to maximize your downforce produced by the floor that's massively changed from this year. So you can't just bung a new floor on and hope you're going to get some sort of different result. So the entire concept will have to be changed. And I absolutely think teams, particularly given how little amount of track testing we're going to get before next season, will start to figure that into the closing 3 races if they're in that position. Not all teams will be in that position, let's face it. In fact, I would imagine they might only see the bigger teams have the capability and be advanced enough to start bringing anything like that to a car. But I absolutely do think that you may well see that from a Mercedes or from a Ferrari or somebody like that. So watch out for those little tweaks that you may see coming in over the last 3 rounds. And particularly at the post-Abu Dhabi test, of course, if they're allowed. I can't remember, not sure what the rules are for that test yet. Quite often they ban them from bringing in new components and they have to run what they ran at the race weekend, which may push that introduction a little bit earlier. So there we go. We'll keep an eye on that. It'll be very, very interesting when it does happen to see what effect it has, and I can't wait to see that. So keep your eyes out. Right, as everyone's saying, subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for joining, everybody. Really appreciate it. Again, sorry about the little blackout midway through. I don't even know what happened there, but appreciate those of you that hung around to stay. I hope you all have a great week. We're building up to the final 3 races of an incredible 2020 season. Loads to talk about, loads to look forward to. Enjoy yourself, folks. Have a great one, and I will see you all very, very soon. Ta-da!